All right, so our first and only review of the day is going to be for Fallout. Fallout, the TV series, they're 8 episodes long. The series here from Amazon Prime. All the 8 episodes dropped at once. First, you got to think that was a good strategy, dropping all at once. Usually they do about 3 episodes up front, and then the rest they release weekly. Do you think that was a good strategy for this show, releasing all 8 episodes at once?
I think so. Like it I mean, I'm not much of a show binger, but I mean, if people wanted it, why not? Netflix has been doing it for years, and just there seems to be pretty good results with the binge crowd. When you're like me, though, you like to savor every bit of it and take your time with it. And either way, it's okay. All the episodes are available. Nothing's stopping me from stopping.
Mm. Yeah. What about you, Sage?
I think it kind of depends on how you end up feeling about the show. If you end up not being a fan, maybe it's a better strategy because you can watch them back to back, not think too hard about what you may not like about it, and then you get to the end before any dissatisfaction sets in. If you do like it, I guess yeah, still kind of either way, I think, for that side, but I think it definitely has an advantage for people who maybe don't end up being positive about it.
Mm, okay. So what is this show about? In case anybody that doesn't know, based on a very, very popular video game series there. And there's lots of series games in the series, Fallout, all the way from which a fifth a Fallout game is going to be coming out pretty soon. And then there's also kind of spin-off games like New Vegas, which is considered the best one for a lot of Fallout fans there. You also have Fallout Shelter, Fallout 76, also a very amount of Fallout games there. Very, very popular video game series, and it is a more or less like Sage was talking about, not really a straight adaptation, but more of a continuation of the video game series that we kind of see here. So, what is this about? In case you've never played the games before, so it kind of details a post-apocalyptic future here after the year 2077. A bunch of nukes dropped there on America, and you see, like the title's just the fallout from that. You see that there are people who live in these vaults there, that have lived in these vaults for many, many years, waiting for a time to come to the surface in order to rule that. You also see a faction of people that survived the nuclear kind of explosion that happened, that when it was bombed on the surface. You also see different kind of groups of people there that kind of operate on the surface, amongst one person you follow by the character Maximus, who's a part of the Brotherhood, which follows a very old timey squire knights type of setup there. You also follow the character of Lucy McLean there, who is the character of the Vault Dweller, that you see there, who's literally never touched grass in her entire life there. Um, and and it also follows the character of Walton Goggins the Ghoul, who's like a bounty hunter, old style cowboy there that's wandering around the world, that you kind of see. So as the series kind of develops here, we won't be doing spoilers. We will be doing a spoiler review Friday. We will be doing that. But because we don't want to do spoilers too early. But that's kind of the general setup. You have kind of three protagonists that you're kind of following throughout this show. One of the real main one is the Lucy character here, who's played by Ella Purnell. So like I said, I haven't played the games, but these two have. So they're very passionate about the series and about the lore, and they can give more insight on that. So it's good to have that different perspective of somebody maybe who hasn't played the game and getting into it. I've heard about the series, but never actually got into it myself. So that'd be good to have those different perspectives. So I'm going to go around, get you all thoughts on this show. So Sage, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts on Fallout, the TV series here?
Well, I want to start out and be positive. I think you have a really great introductory moment at the beginning of the show, kicking things off with one of your lead characters, seeing a little bit of the world kind of before it becomes what it is. the out of work actor, the down on his luck. You kind of get the sense that his life's fallen apart. You don't know exactly why or how, but it's a great contrast to open on that when you have him playing this kind of badass cowboy character. To see him almost the complete opposite, like a children's birthday clown version of a cowboy. I think there's a cool reflection there. And I think Walton Goggins brings a lot of pathos to a moment like that at the beginning. And it's a really great kind of lift off moment to take into things.
Yeah. He's the character there that looks like the fake ass Red Skull there that you see with the no nose and kind of the burnt skin there, the ghoul character. Um, Purple, what do you think
Mhm.
about the Fallout series?
So far, so good. I've only seen up through episode 3, but like I said, like I'm one of those like because I know the series so well, I have the nasty habit of pausing and trying to catch every frame for every little Easter egg. Like in the first episode, near the very end, not to give spoilers away, but there's a certain weapon that's revealed. I literally shouted in the house to my roommate. He's like, "Great, they got the insert weapon here," but I was just geeking out. I'm not so worried about the story wise. I don't know. I worked in movie theaters for a lot, and I've grown to limit my expectations when it comes to adaptations and this film in general. And so I go into everything, like if it's a show or a movie, with no expectations. I just expect to have a good time. And so far, admittedly, I am biased because I just love the series as is, but I'm having a blast. I'm not too worried about the story. I'm along for the ride. Production-wise, I'm loving how it's looking, like the use of practical effects and just how grounded it seems compared to, I don't know, I'm trying to think of other video game adaptation films that just made no sense whatsoever.
Uh,
Something like Final Fantasy: Spirit Within.
That's a good
well,
one.
uh,
That's a callback.
a lot of people have been praising this show. It has a really good reaction. I think so far on Rotten Tomatoes. Last time I looked, I think the audience score was in the 80% there.
Mm.
And then also the critic score was 93. Yeah, this is it right here. Not to say that that really necessarily means it's a good show or anything, but just saying that there are some people who are kind of digging it and are kind of liking it. Especially a lot of people thought that from the trailers, maybe it would be a complete disaster here, to get much, much lower. And then some people are even saying that this is one of the best video game adaptations ever, right up there with something like even this, The Last of Us. This, which I was a big fan of this. I thought this was very good. I think this is when you talk about video game adaptations, I think this is very peak. Um, Adaptations. I mean, this had people who even knew the game and knew the story, still, anticipating each week what was going to happen. And that was kind of impressive that the show was able to pull that off. And you had amazing performances from Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey in this. So yeah, really, really great performances all around. Really great episodes there. So yeah, so for someone like me, like I said, I coming in this series knew about the video game series, but they have never played it. And just the show coming up out. I will say, yeah, one of the big standouts is Walton Goggins. Walton Goggins is always amazing in the various things. If you ever seen him in anything, if you ever seen him in Justified, he's amazing in that. If you ever seen him in things like Predators or things like The Shield, which I think The Shield was one of his very, very big breaks, was that show, The Shield there. But always a really great standout in anything he's ever in. And I do much love him. And his character as the ghoul, even though the character he plays very, very OP. I mean, he basically, I mean, from what I'm gaining from watching this show, is almost he's practically invincible. Almost. People can shoot him and stab him and do all types of things, and then he can still survive pretty much there in this. But he very much is that role of I guess I guess the show is also trying to be like a video game in that sense of also having like that type of character with him, and then the things that he can do when it comes in terms of the action, in which they do kind of what something I do know from the series of the video game series is the scenes where it's like the slow motion when somebody fires the weapon and then body parts will explode or things with it, which they do bring that into the show there. And especially with this scene right here, where they do that, where he kind of is able to do that here. Let me see. Let me kind of go a little bit further. That's the only thing they show there. But he kind of does do that in some of the action scenes there, which I thought, okay, they bring that there. And the three kind of protagonists, the other kind of two people that you kind of see there, the Maximus character and the Lucy character, I think they're fine. I just don't think they match necessarily maybe the interesting nature of Walton Goggins' character. I think they all fit again, like kind of a video game type of like the Maximus is like kind of the good guy when you do the good guy option in the video game. And maybe you always kind of mess up in some of those choices. And then Lucy kind of represents the more moral, you know what I mean? You're trying to be the hero here. You're trying to go around and kind of do a lot of helping people, saving things in this world. What did you think about the three kind of characters that you follow here, Sage?
Well, I mentioned that I thought Walton Goggins really brought a lot of pathos to his character, and that I was very impressed by what he was able to do. Um, Sadly, I kind of run out of compliments for the show after that. Um, One of the things that bothered me kind of right off the bat is one of the opening sequences is Lucy kind of almost giving you like a character sheet breakdown, like the traits and skills that you'd fill out for an RPG. And in particular, she references having a speech skill picked up, and I felt like you kind of have this whole moment spent on that idea, and then throughout the whole rest of the show, I feel like she never actually used any of those skills or traits really. And it's one of those things where I didn't mind the moment at the beginning in and of itself, but it felt like it was there just to be a reference to it being a video game. And then to go over to Maximus, I was actually kind of with that storyline in the first episode. But once they kind of send on the actual mission, I really started to lose interest there too, just with the way that the visual effects of stuff like the power armor were done, and the personality clash that they have with some of that. I just wasn't really feeling it.
Mm. What about for you, Purple?
Yeah, I can see where you're coming through with that. I mean, Walton Goggins definitely like he loves westerns. Like he really put it all into this for playing the ghoul. And I see what you're saying about Maximus too. Like beyond the first episode, it's well the interactions that he has with like Knight Titus, and it some of it seemed a little staggered. I don't know how to how to describe it really. Like it reminded me a bit of Fallout 76 when they first added NPCs and there'd be 6 seconds of pause between dialogue. Um, and so I felt like they had to get from A to B really quick, and they kind of wanted to show. I imagine that they wanted to show a bit more of the Brotherhood of Steel aspirants that we didn't really get to see much in previous games.
Mm.
But yeah, besides from Walton Goggins' character, he's definitely the best one, I think. Uh, Talking about Lucy, yeah, with like the character traits in the beginning, I think yeah, they definitely threw in a lot of stuff to be like Easter eggs. Like, yeah, that's a video game thing, and I can see where they did that and had fun with it. Like her not using all her traits in that sense, I can see that too being a bit of a downer. But I
Mm.
don't know. Having not seen the whole show yet, I'm gonna have to hold off judgment on their whole character arcs. But
Yeah.
so far, I'm liking where they're starting. Be curious to see where they end up, though.
Yeah. So a lot of them do have stories. You have with Lucy, her father got kidnapped. There was a raider, raiders kind of raid there that did with one of the vaults that you see at the beginning. Massacred a lot of people that lived in the vault, and then she comes from Vault 33, is where she kind of comes from, and you learn that there's like hundreds of vaults all around the country of America there, and then some that are connected, which Sage tells me breaks the lore of the video games there somewhat.
I mean, it doesn't break the lore to have vaults that are connected. It's just that it was I think in the first episode they don't explain very well that, hey, this particular vault is connected to another one. um, you just kind of have a moment of them walking through, and I was wondering because I'm like, oh well, I've never
Yeah.
seen that before. I could totally buy that that exists. I just wish that they had been like, oh hey, this vault's connected to this vault, and this is what makes this vault unique. Is this kind of unique little setup? I just wish they
Oh,
gave you a little bit more of an explanation about that because I was confused at the beginning. I was like, wait, how is this working? And then a little later on, they kind of clarify. I was like, okay, that does make sense to a degree. It just I don't know. I think the way they paced out the exposition there was just a little odd.
Mm, okay. Yeah, and you see that, there, that the volts are kind of the 31, 31. I mean, 33, 31, and 32 are all kinda connected to each other there that you kinda see. So
yeah.
her father gets kidnapped, who there is, played by, Cal McLachlan, who people might know from Twin Peaks, and he was, of course, Paul Atreides. He was way back when, there in 1984. And he plays the father there, and he gets kidnapped, and goes on a mission to go get her father back, and that's kind of sets her off on her journey, and then going to the surface, which is something vault dwellers never do. They never go to the surface. They never even open the door there, that you see. So they kind of have that. Ulysses said Vault 33 would be the only vault like that in the lore. There, so you have
Yeah,
that.
it would be totally
Mhm.
unique for sure.
Yeah.
As I
Um,
mentioned earlier, they kind of like add stuff into the lore so it's not always 100% accurate. Like 32, 31, 33 all being connected in some way. That's definitely new. But I kind of like that difference because it's like, oh, how much more can they cram in?
mm. And you kind of see that. So that's what sets her off on her journey. Question about the Sage was telling me about the show. I mean, about the video game series that there's very dark humor a lot of in the games that you have, and it seems like a lot of the humor that is in the show comes from the Vault Dwellers. I mean, there's some stuff with the Surface People and kind of the weird antics they kind of get up to. The chicken fucker, you got that kind of going in there. But it seems like a lot of the humor does come from the Vault, and then just them being so oblivious, I guess, or naive in a sense there. How did you kinda like the humor and the way it was done in the show there, Purple? I know you've only seen a few episodes, but how'd you like some of the humor there early
So far, so good. I felt like they could have gone a bit darker with some of the humor, just because I'm used to like the Fallout kind. But like the circumstances that the Vault Dweller finds themselves in, it's like, yep, I could see that happening in a Fallout game. Uh huh. Chop off the guys. Yeah. Mm hmm. Carry. Okay, that's different. And it's, I don't know. Like to me, the humor in it so far so good. I'm enjoying it. The subplot with the Vault Dwellers just being completely oblivious, it kind of makes sense to me. I mean, it's kind of like an alternate look on reality. You have isolationists and you have um everyone else that doesn't isolate, and it's just completely different. Not necessarily good or bad, but having that difference shown, I think, is part of the. It helps with the. I think it helps with the overall visual that they're trying to go for. It's
on?
like because when they're mentioning how vault dwellers are, just selfish, only rich people were able to get into them, et cetera, why there's so much dislike for vault dwellers. It's kind of like deep rooted in American history. How that had haves and have nots, but it's not a social ethics lesson.
What about for you, say?
Well, humor, ultimately comedy, right, is it's like the most subjective thing, right? So, I don't blame anybody for this working for them or enjoying it at all. And I totally agree about the idea that it makes sense that they'd be oblivious and naive to a degree. But for me personally, there was like a sweet middle spot that it kind of missed where I feel like we went past uh just like naive and oblivious to there's a gas leak at all times, and these people are suffering from some sort of brain damage.
Yeah, because these people are very, very ultra friendly. there that you have this where, their form of punishment is just sending you to the surface is kind of their form of punishment. Or, they'll actually keep you as a prisoner there and feed you actually some pretty good meals, 3 square meals a day, you know what I mean? It's pretty nice, give you some good beds, tuck them in, wash your clothes, put the extra, get the nice extra dryer sheets on there, the good kind too, the snuggle kind, real smell, real fresh. So, eh, you kind of do have that. I don't know if that's the way they're also in the game, is that's kind of how their personality is. But it's, oh, you gonna say something?
Oh no, I was just saying. I was thinking. I'm a visual thinker. I make faces when I'm thinking.
Oh, okay. Sage, were you gonna say anything? It seemed like you were.
I could the different vault communities, they're unique somewhat to each other because they are isolated. So I'd say, like some of them you see, you know, kids and see them actually kind of learning and maybe a little bit more of an actual education happening, depending
Mm,
on the game we're talking about. So I think you're going to get a different feel, at least a little bit, for each specific one. But
okay. And you do see some other Volt communities there that they go to, and you see that one is ran by Chris Parnell, who's the Cyclops that you kind of see there. One ran by him. Um, and with the Brotherhood, which is another say I didn't really talk too much about. So it's kind of, can you explain a little about what the Brotherhood is and kind of how they operate there, Sage?
yeah, the Brotherhood of Steel is I think sometimes people mistake them for being a purely religious organization, but which they are to a degree. I mean, they have these knights, these scribes. They kind of treat science like a little bit of a religion, but the big thing is that they hoard technology. They hoard it. They are not nice. They are these kind of reprehensible in a lot of ways people, very bully society that's kind of formed itself to hoard technology and just kind of maintain power. Very unfriendly to outsiders, very yeah, but they also have a lot of kind of internal respect for their own people and the way they treat each other, which is something that I felt like the show maybe didn't quite capture right for me. I felt like there was a little bit of like a frat college hazing thing going on that I felt maybe didn't quite jive with how I think of them being.
Yeah, and this is the knights there that you see, these armored people there, which usually they're the on the cover of the actual video game there. And Purple, you watched a video about the kind of some of the behind the scenes thing with these people. So this was mostly practical with a lot of these.
Yeah, the power armor frames. I don't not sure to how much, but I if I recall correctly, the only thing they really animated on the armor was going to be well the jets, like the jet exhaust, like off
Mm,
the arms, which I thought was a creative change. Kind of makes sense. You get a bit more control if you're kind of directing where you go. Anyway, but also the faceplate. In the previous games, the faceplates have never risen up like an Iron Man suit, to put it
yeah.
frankly. They did kind of. I noticed they took a little bit of inspiration with that, and that was pretty good. The only yeah, all they animated was just like the glass frame that would lift up and down, but the actual armor themselves, they would have to step into it. They had the flight suit on. So cool. I'm a big fan of
And
practical effects in anything.
And you do actually see, like, when inside the suit when they're kinda moving around, it does look like you accurately described, kinda like Iron Man thing, like a heads up kinda display like that, where you see, I know, Sage, you thought most of the effects were kinda bad in this show. I thought the stuff with the knights worked. I thought they looked good for the most part. I think that's where they put probably most of the money is with the knights. Some of the other stuff that they have here, for example, like, there's some scenes with characters, like, their foot would be falling off and it would be like bone. That did look really kinda not as good, or they did some de-aging stuff that didn't look as maybe good. What'd you think about some of the effects there, Purple, and some of the action that you saw?
Well, I thought it was pretty good. My like when you typical Fallout gore would be, dismemberment, shooting off a leg, blowing a head off, or more like just crushing the head. And thinking about crushing a particular head, I I don't know. I have seen better effects when it comes to gore, but I don't know. I've never been much of a gore examiner, so it's like it got the visual to me. It's like, oh yeah, that's I don't know. I'm more of a person that enjoys the practical effects of the visual, and I don't know how much more real it would look. I don't know how much more real I would want it to look. It seemed okay to me though, with like the gore and the violence, shooting bullets. I mean, what's the one revolver shotgun that the ghoul has, blowing holes in people. Seemed okay to me.
Yeah. I think some of the effects when it comes to the action when they're doing that with people like people's limbs get exploded, like there's one scene with Michael Emerson, where his just whole kind of bottom of his leg, his ankle kind of gets blown off there. Which I think that looks kind of okay. But Sage, you have was all of the effects kind of an issue for it, or did you like any kind of things effects wise?
The stuff that both of you are talking about, where the limbs are getting blown off during some, especially some of those early action scenes with Walton Goggins, I actually think those, I think that does look good. Um, for like the power armor, I think it looks genuinely great when it's not moving. But anytime it starts moving around, to me, it felt like they were doing like a CG touch up over the joints to make it look to try and make the movement smoother, and it kind of just pulled it at the seams for me personally, and it just and I could see how they totally made it look practical because when it's not moving, I don't really notice the same flaws, but it's something just kind of there's like a sheen over it that kind of fell over my eyes that I just had a hard time looking past. And to be honest, a lot of the time I was getting a little bit of a Star Wars prequel feel with some of the effects here, just in terms of environments and some of the sets where I often felt like it just didn't quite look dirty enough for how I think of Fallout. Like it wasn't quite so just gross and dirt covered and I don't know. And then some of the stuff, like some of the makeup, like as much as I love Walton Goggins, I kind of thought they cheaped out on the ghoul makeup a little bit, and maybe that's just because they wanted to get some of his handsome face, still in the camera. But I think of the ghouls as like skin is falling off the bone, and like they are just like viscerally necrotizing, disgusting. And so I don't know. A lot of the effects, yeah, really didn't work for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see about Walton Goggins' makeup. Yeah, because that's kind of how I imagine ghouls. But I also like how they made ghouls more scarce in the show. Whereas if you play any of the Fallout games, like your first encounter with a ghoul in the more recent Fallout games are like within the first 5 hours, and they're just as strong as a regular human being in most cases. I love how they made like talking about Goggins, how his character seems to be so invincible. Um, I like that aspect too. But yeah,
Yeah. So you
I
do
wish they
see
could have done more flesh.
some different variations of ghouls that you see throughout the show. Very much like kind of like zombies, like in The Walking Dead. Like some zombies look more decomposed than other zombies, so some look rougher than others. Here, did you kind of want maybe Walton Goggins to maybe look a little bit like Deadpool, kind of without the mask here, kind of like that is kind of what you think more should he kind of do?
To be honest, the joke that I would have made is that he looked too much like Deadpool, where I even like the way Deadpool looks there. I think that's just not quite gross enough to me. And
Mm,
the comment I saw you put up on the screen there from BFG about the power armor during like the actual fight scenes. Yeah, I think I agree with that. I just think when it's really moving around at a lot and high speeds, I noticed that like it's not really touching the other actors. Like there's this kind of weird editing I noticed in a lot of the sequences. Like the gunfights, I think that looks really good. When people are trying to punch each other, I'm getting like 70s like bad
mm,
wire kung fu movie. Nobody's quite touching each other filmmaking.
mm. Okay. And of course, with this, you always have to have, the three of them kind of converge and kind of meet. With the stories, all their stories interconnect because one of the things that really connects all of them and why they're kind of all meeting each other and kind of, run into each other is there's this head that they're kind of looking for. And what that head kind of belongs to Michael Emerson. And this, if you like Michael Emerson, don't get too attached to him. If you do, and Michael Emerson again, I mean, if you ever seen Michael Emerson in anything, For instance, like Lost, which he I think really blew up with Lost. There, he was also in another Jonathan Nolan project. Who Jonathan Nolan is the showrunner of this. Um, he was also in Persons of Interest. He plays another role where he's the creepy, cryptic, weird guy, smart guy, and he was like that in Persons of Interest. He was like that in Lost. Even when he voiced the Joker in the animated film, he's kind of also like that. And again, he's like that here as well. And that's kind of one of the things that everybody's looking for. Everybody's racing to find because something's very very special about him. And then also it kind of has that video game nature of the Lucy character of her getting tasked to take this head to the main villain of the series, the one that ended up kidnapping her father, Meldover. There, and it's like if you take me to her, then you're going to get a chance to meet her, and then maybe get your father back. Bargain and trade, and able to do that. Yeah, that's what's kind of like. So when the characters eventually do kind of meet each other and do kind of interact, did it improve it for any of you? Like some of the characters, did it make some of them seem better for you? All there.
I You had to make them. I like it. I like how they contrast with each other. Like
Yeah.
just the personalities. Like you see Lucy trying to failing her speech checks and trying to calm things down. Um, yeah, I mean, I wish there was like some sort of like a dice roll that would have gone on during that scene. I don't know. The I felt like yeah, having them contrast in Philly is it was a good way for them to meet. Kind of rushed, I felt, but I mean, when you only have 6 episodes or 8 episodes, not
8.
remembering how
8.
many 8, thank you. We only have 8 episodes and you got a story to tell. I can see how the beginning was kinda rushed. It's also, like, kind of how it's rushed in some of their other games too, how the beginning is like, "Get out the vault," and quickly get these established characters all within 2 episodes, and now we've got our wasteland to explore.
Mm. What about for you? Does it improve when Walton Gong? Does he kind of help you? Does he make them any better when he's interacting with Lucy and Ella Parnell's character or Maximus or?
I do think that Walton Goggins, once you get like two of those characters into a scene together, I do think it improves somewhat. But at the same time, I'm kind of looking at Walton Goggins like, here's another weight we're gonna attach to your ankle and make you do this with. And because yeah, I just so much of every everything that's not him. Uh, just wasn't really coming together for me. And you mentioned the kind of the head MacGuffin kind of quest line of the story, and I can't say much about that because I'm going to try not to spoil anything. But where that ultimately does go, and kind of what that head ends up providing for the story, and the purpose of it once you get that full explanation, for me, that kind of makes the entire bottom of this just fall out from under it.
Yeah. I guess I will say, some of the stuff, there's definitely some stuff is more interesting. When they go to more of the backstory pre-war with Walton Goggins, that's very interesting, and that how that all came to be with Vault Tech. That kind of history I thought was interesting. I think the worst stuff for me in the show was the Vault stuff in the future, with present day in the show where they're doing the politics of this and then discovering, what's the big mystery behind the vaults and what's kind of going on there. You do have actually speaking of Deadpool, you actually got an actress from Deadpool there, Leslie Uggams, who was Blind Owl there speaking about
Mhm.
that, who is one of the overseers of one of the vaults there, Vault 31, and then actually Vault 33, she's the overseer of, and she came from Vault 31. But you have a lot of this politics kind of going on there. For me, that was just I wasn't as interested in that as everyone else. What about for you, Purple? I know you're very early in, but do you see some of that kind of form? Do you have like an early on favorite storyline for you?
I mean, I wanna know more about, of course, Walton Goggins' character pre-war. I love that aspect. In the very first scene of the show when he's, at the party and trying to examine and get a better glimpse into pre-Fallout Fallout. It's nice to have that and kind of see how the world just was and still kept its same biases and it kept its same problems. Like I remember one of the dads at the birthday party called Goggins. I don't know if it's a slur. I'm not going to say it, but called him something that you would call a person that was okay with having love with a person of color. And I was like, "Oh, are they gonna use worse than that? Probably not." The other Fallout games never really went into slurs like that, but it kind of made me very interested into the pre-war story, and I wouldn't mind. I'm only 3 episodes in. I'm hoping there's a lot more.
Mm,
If not, just to see Goggins' beautiful face.
mm. What about for you? So do you have, anything? I know you say the Walton Goggins stuff is your favorite, but what is for you your least favorite, your storyline that kind
I'm almost hard to decide because I genuinely really didn't super care for so much of the other storylines. I I I I think I'd probably go with the vault subplot as well. I mean, I see issues that kind of I pop up for me all over the whole thing, but I definitely felt like the vault story just was kind of treading water and filling it time so that there was another plot line happening. Even beyond just not really caring for the dialogue or how the characters were written, it just didn't feel up until maybe the last like 15 minutes of screen time that story arc has by the end of the season. Even if even if you like the developments that come from that, it felt like only like 15 minutes of that time actually led to development.
of? Yeah. For a payoff at the end that I don't think is that really interesting. I don't think the way they do it, I don't think it's that interesting. Um,
And kind of massively retcons and contradicts some very concrete explanations from Fallout 2 that we were at least told that were pretty concrete before.
yeah. I like some of
Like,
the journey stuff there. I like Lucy kind of discovering the surface, and it was like, damn, it's fucked up out here. You know what I mean? I kind of like that a little bit, and it kind of she becomes more ragged and just like trying to maintain her optimism and moral kind of attitude of doing good. Do upon others what you would want to do. Do good and put that into the world. But every turn, people are trying to eat her, they're trying to harvest our organs, everything like that, and it's kind of like, damn, it's kind of rough there, and you kind of have that. Um, so I did kind of like some of the stuff that was going on with her and her journey. So I did like that. There is kind of a love interest that kind of comes in here to the story. Um, I thought it was okay. I wouldn't say I was super invested in it. How did you think that kind of played out for you there? Say,
I can't lie, I didn't really feel it at all. I didn't really care for either of the characters on their own that much. And I didn't feel like the build up to something like that felt earned or dynamic really. Um, it to me it felt like a way to try and inject some character without actually writing anything for the characters to have.
mm, okay, yeah, it's just that. Yeah. For you,
no,
purple. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
oh, I was gonna ask a follow up on that. No real like start and finish for the love story aspect of it. Just kind of like, oh, this is a guy, this is a girl. Let's have a small love thing, and just not really go anywhere with it.
100%. 100%
Gotcha.
that.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like there was like a hey, these two have character traits that are interesting on their own and then dynamically reflect off each other in a way that's unique or feels special. It just kind of felt like here's the male character and here's the female character. Might as well do that in the story.
Yeah.
I can see that with the whole knight in shining armor vibe. Especially since, I mean, Lucy's hubby, like, that was not a great night. But yeah, I can see how it would happen. But yeah, if they had a direction they wanted to go with it, I could see it being more useful as a plot.
Yeah.
But I don't know, the love story aspect, you don't always need it, you know? I mean, a guy and a girl can be completely platonic in a sense. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, this is probably not necessary, but something they could have done in like a season 2 or just like
Yeah, maybe if
how
more time.
If it was like a show from before live streaming and seasons were only 8 episodes, 12 episodes long, if it were a full 20 episode season, maybe they would have that time to develop something.
Yeah.
But I don't know, 8 episodes is just too little for something like that.
Yeah. Uh,
There's also a particular scene, and I won't say anything too specific, but between the two of them and the dialogue, like it really it crossed my mind that it felt like something like between Beavis and Butthead and like a Van Wilder movie in terms of the way that it was written and just kind of almost being raunchy just for the sake of it without anything else really to it.
yeah. And I think some of the stuff there, I guess you can explain of like, you have to think these people, the society they live in, there's not a lot of courting going on, especially on Lisa's perspective. I mean, the only courting she's done is with her actual family, what I mean, cousin there. You know what I mean? She was doing some royal family type shit there a little bit. So that you did have that. And so there wasn't that. The only presentation of this people, this world they know is through just videos and then, what they kinda get a little bit in this kinda, like I said, vault here that you kinda see. Um, and I guess some of the stuff you can also explain away with Maximus too, growing up in this very military, kind of environment, just meant to learn, to train, to fight, to, gather, resources there. That's kinda all that was kinda there. Um so yeah, get into some of the lore stuff. I don't want you to spoil anything, Sage, but for you, and I'll ask also to Ulysses, who's also in the chat there, lore wise, where do you think that this show goes wrong?
Well, I think for like maybe the first 6 episodes or so, I don't think there's anything too egregious. Actually, I think probably 2/3 of this for the are generally like, I might not be super into this, but it's not totally breaking anything. But as it gets closer to the end, it really starts to throw some ideas out there that just feel very incongruent with especially the original two games. Uh, the sense that I kind of get is that Bethesda has always wanted or kind of seen Fallout as a post-apocalypse story, and I being a bigger fan of the narratives in the first two games and in New Vegas as well, because a lot of the writers from Black Isle went on to become the writers of Obsidian. And so those three games, one, two, New Vegas, they're more of a post-apocalypse story. It's more about the post-apocalypse period has kind of come to an end, and there's a much more nuanced and complicated, functional, multi-warring civilization states narrative playing out. And Bethesda Fallout is always, to me, felt a little more like, hey, let's keep it more of a post-apocalypse. Let's keep it more of a wasteland story. Whereas, yeah, I'd say one, two, New Vegas, more of a frontier story, if that makes sense, kind of the difference between those ideas. And they really just start to, I don't know, they do some things where one, two, New Vegas take place on the West Coast, and the three, four are very much on the East Coast. And this show kind of feels like Bethesda was like, we want to Bethesdafy the West Coast half of the series and kind of turn it into what we want it to be. Whereas I think, I wasn't always a huge fan of the Bethesda games, but I thought, no matter whether I like them or not, there's kind of two separate things happening here. You have an East Coast, you have a West Coast, and it's cool that they can be their own different things and appeal to different fans. But because this is not an adaptation, it's a continuation and it's meant to be canonical, it bothers me that they tried to apply the sensibility of the East Coast games to the West Coast stuff.
Okay. And Ulysses, I hear he said the latter half of the series blatantly ignores Fallout 2 and New Vegas and clashes with the original themes of the franchise. That's what he says.
I agree
Uh,
with that. I do.
Yeah. The original, I mean, Fallout's 1 and 2, you had lore, you had pretty established borders for like the NCR, the Enclave, Brotherhood of Steel, and yeah, whereas I do definitely agree with you on that. And having not seen the rest of the show, it does seem kind of a bit of a bummer that Bethesda might have decided to go that way as a wasteland. But maybe that's something they want to develop in the show. I don't know. Like, I I will always be a glass is half full kind of person, but I can definitely see them wanting to go away from the Black Isle
hmm.
and kind of make it their own. It seems like a bummer they would write over it, I guess. But also, I'm not too sure about time frame wise. Off the top of my head, I can't recall when Fallout's 1 and 2 take place, but I think the show is supposed to be the latest, like furthest in the future for all current entries. I
That is
wonder
the
if
case. The show is
okay.
2297, I believe, is the year it takes place in.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I mean the I
The
wonder if
fir-
they're gonna fill something else in to like kind of explain, oh, this is what happened to that within the 30 years between Fallout 2 and the show or whatever, however long it was.
yeah.
Maybe
And
not
I'll
though.
avoid being specific on this, but there's something they do. They bring up a certain thing and say this happened this year, and then with the timeline, you have New Vegas's story about 4 years after that,
Uh,
and it's such a major significant thing that would happen that in the 100 hours of playing that you can spend on New or more that you can spend on New Vegas and the story in that, it's just so unbelievable to me that that mystery moment, I won't name it, but that would just never be addressed or would ever come up. And it also it retcons geography as well in a weird way. Like you can pull up maps from some of the other games and go like, this is here, this is here, this is the name of this place, this is the name of this place, and they just kind of swap stuff around. This is something that's in the trailers even, but in the games, the East and West Coasts have completely original branding. Like you have the Poseidon oil gas stations on the West Coast, you've got the Red Rocket on the East Coast. Red Rocket's the only thing you see on the West Coast in the show, even though, and that's a small detail, like that I could even, that's something I could say is maybe a little more nitpicky, but it just kind of compounds on top of the bigger things that are there. And I start to notice and pull at the thread, and I notice more and more little things where to me, it just doesn't. If they said this was an adaptation and it was its own world, not a direct continuation of the games, I would let all of those things go. I'd shut up and I wouldn't even bring them up. I'd be like, yep, it's its own thing. I'm not even going to think about that. That's fine. But because they're adamant that this is, Todd Howard said, oh, this is basically Fallout 5. And I'm like, well, maybe you should have paid a little more attention then.
In the first game, so it takes place 2161, and then Fallout 2 is 2241. Is when the second game takes place there, timeline wise. Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna go around and get you guys maybe final thoughts on this, and then kind of wrap up. But as a show, I mean, I mean, this is getting a lot of praise. I mean, this show is. A lot of people are really loving it. Like I said, do I think this is in the pantheon? I mean, there ain't that many of great video game adaptations, but do I think it's on the
It's
level
true.
of, you know what I mean? There's a few great ones. There's like, okay, there's The Last of Us, there's Castlevania, there's Arcane. That's very very few of like really great ones that we can say. Do I think it's on the level? I have seen Last of Us, and I love Last of Us. I thought Last of Us was really great. Do I think it's on the level of something like this? No, I don't. I don't think it has the level of writing. I don't think it has the level of performances in here. I don't think it has the level of drama in here that Fallout does. I mean, that Last of Us does there. I don't think it has. I don't think Fallout has any of that stuff here, like Last of Us. But also, Last of Us is also a different type of post-apocalyptic type story. That I think leaning more heavily into a lot of the more like something like The Road or Children of Men there with that. And then I think, would it be fair to say Fallout is trying to lean a little bit more towards, in terms of post-apocalyptic, more towards like Zombieland maybe type.
More parody-like, yeah, something like that.
Okay, so it'd be more something like that, and then the humor. Sometimes it would kinda work, sometimes it wouldn't for me. I think there's a little bit more misses than it is hits for me. I think some of it was a little kinda corny or not worth just as how oblivious these people are in the vault, I think just didn't work for me very well, and like I said, I think some of that's the weakest stuff, and then you're following the character of Norm, who's the brother of Lucy in this, who was very I don't know why his personality was that in the way of, like, why out of all the people that you would follow him and his personality in this story just, like, wasn't very interesting, and I thought that was, again, one of the weakest elements there, and then the surface stuff, I think, when you met the actual surface girl and those people, I guess maybe, you didn't wanna spend too much time with them because you had to keep the story moving, but if you could give a little bit more of the people there, a little bit more of a personality, a little bit more of a kind of a presence in the story of, like, gives you a sense of how these people dealt with living on the surface this long. I think that would have been better. You do get a little of that with the woman who owns the shop that Lucy goes to. You do get a little bit with that, there. Um, Overall, I just think it's a decent show. I don't think it's great. I just think it's kinda just okay for me. Purple, what about you? I know you've seen 3. What's kinda you said pretty high on you, your early impressions?
Yeah, I mean, as far as like a grade scale, I mean, with all valid criticisms like the writing not feeling smooth, the maybe the chemistry between some of the actors might not be like it's definitely not like Last of Us level. I 100% agree with you on that. I definitely give it like a 7.5, an 8-ish. I think it deserves at least a 7 so far. But yeah, for me, it's 9 out of 10 because I just love Fallout and I'm definitely biased. But I think a solid 7.5 and worth a good binge.
Okay. What about you there, Sage?
Well, I am. This is just going to be one of those times on the internet where I kind of go and stand on an island by myself for all the universal praise I've seen this show get. Part of me feels like I'm watched the show in an episode of The Twilight Zone and just has had such a different experience from like everyone else. I really see the very original two Fallout games as kind of sci-fi masterpieces. Like I put them on a level of technical achievement and storytelling closer to something like the original Dune novels or Isaac Asimov's Foundation series. I think they're very technical, very smart, very well put together, richly detailed, satirically dark, but also really good at knowing when to pull back and when to be serious, when to be dramatic. And I've already in the past had issues with the way that Bethesda changed what they or kind of did what they thought Fallout should be. And the show just it kind of feels like a further extension of that idea or evolution of that concept. And so to me, it feels a little insulting to the stuff that I do like. I'm going all the way down to a burn it for this one. The
Wow.
few things
Burn
that I do appreciate about this show, I had certain fun with a lot of sequences. The pre-war elements, which I think there's more of it than I was expecting. I genuinely really like those parts of the story, and I kind of wish the whole show maybe had even been that. But it's just not enough to save what I don't like about this, and I just feel like it doesn't really respect where it came from. The original creators are nowhere to be seen in any of the credits at all. The director said Todd Howard invented Fallout, and I can't help but think Todd Howard told him that, and they just kind of went with it. And even a quote was, it was so nice of Bethesda to allow Black Isle and Obsidian to create things in Todd's universe. I saw that quote in an interview, and I'm just like, it just seems to have no kind of appreciation for where it came from.
Damn, Burn It, which is one of our second to lowest, ratings there. It's right above Waste of Fucking Film there, the lowest you can give something. Wow. And I
I
think
don't blame
Purple
anybody for enjoying it either. I really don't. I
no,
just,
I
for me
mean,
personally.
No,
not say
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are I've seen some people also, like you have, disliked it, strongly as well. People who are kind of diehard fans about it as well. And on our scale, Purple would give it probably that would be like a high tune-ish territory right there. For me, I'd kind of give it like a lowish tune in, maybe a stream it there for me. Would I be? They are doing a season two. A season two is coming. Um, do you think that it can improve with a season two? Would you watch a season two and review season two? There, say.
Yeah, I'll watch it. I mean, it might be kind of a hate watch experience. I'm gonna be completely honest about it, but I'll watch it and I'll see what they do. Um, but my confidence level at the idea that it would have a turnaround for me is very low.
And Ulysses, you can also give your rating if you're still there in the chat. I would like to hear your thoughts on that. Give your
Oh,
rating.
I think
But
he's
yeah,
harsher than I am, honestly.
uh, yeah, but it just didn't really blow me away or anything like that. Just like it's kind of decent. I think it can improve on a lot of elements. For season two, the visuals. I don't know what the budget on it. Do you know what the budget on this show was? Okay, let me see if I can look up the budget real quick. But yeah, I think it can improve on some things. Make especially where her character kind of ends off Lucy. I think you can do some more stuff with her um, and make that good, especially and also where the Maximus character ends up on. And this has one of the largest budgets of any of the shows at 153 million. What's the budget on this? Yeah.
Wow, that's hard to believe for me looking at some of it.
I
Admit
know what I
now.
mean. Yeah, so that's 153 million. Wow, that is a lot. I mean, I could see some of the stuff. I mean, some of the stuff, the backgrounds look pretty good. I think that. I mean, some of the wasteland stuff. I think some of that looks kind of all right. And Ulysses, he says 3 out of 10. As well, I was really hoping the show would defy my expectations after episode one, but it fell off a cliff for me after. Then fell off a second cliff in episode 7.
Fell
Um,
down the Springfield Gorge for him, I think.
wow.
Oh, wow. That's a reference.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So some people might love it, some people might hate it, some people might be in the middle, kind of just, it's all right. Yeah, it does make me kind of maybe interested to play the games there, maybe interested trying to check those out. So yeah, that was our review of the Fallout TV series there. Thank you to Sage, thank you to Purple there, thank you to Ulysses in the chat there for all his knowledge there, and Radio Infantry, you guys are going to be doing a spoiler review for that tomorrow.